What if a cornerstone of your faith was turned completely on its head? Today, we're going to dive into a source that does exactly that. It deconstructs a really popular theological doctrine and then proposes a pretty radical alternative. So let's break down this argument piece by piece.
All right, so the big idea we're tackling here is called substitutionary atonement. This is the widely held belief that Christ basically acted as a substitute, that he took on the punishment, specifically God's wrath, that was actually meant for us. This is the classic story, the one our source is about to completely take apart.
And yeah, our source material, it does not pull any punches. It calls this core idea offensive and repugnant. So this isn't just a minor disagreement. The author sees it as a fundamental violation of justice itself. The big question is why?
Well, first, the source lays out what it calls the popular scheme. It basically goes like this. Man messes up, breaks God's law, and ends up under his wrath. The penalty for that? Endless torment. Now, God's justice demands a payment has to be made before he can forgive anyone, so the Son of God steps in, offers to be the substitute, and God pours all of that wrath onto his innocent Son instead of the guilty party. And only then is God finally reconciled to man. Okay, so keep that story in your head because we're about to see it get turned upside down.
And the first point of attack is aimed right at the character of God himself. The source argues that this popular story creates a deep and, frankly, a troubling contradiction. And this is where you see a huge contrast. The popular view gives us this angry, severe God who needs a victim to satisfy his rage. But the source paints a completely different picture. A loving father whose main motivation is love, and whose justice is actually meant to help the sinner, not just punish them. According to our source, you just can't have it both ways. These two versions of God are totally incompatible.
And this quote, man, it really gets to the heart of the whole thing. The author is insisting that any framework that puts a cold, payback-style justice ahead of the fundamental attribute of God's love, well, it just has to be wrong. For this whole argument to work, love has to be the starting point for literally everything.
Okay, let's get into the second major challenge. This one is all about the direction of the action. The source argues that the popular view gets the entire flow of reconciliation completely backward.
So check this out. This is the big flip. The popular story says Christ's death was needed to change God's mind, to reconcile an angry God to us. But the source reverses this completely, quoting scripture to argue that God was the one actively working to reconcile the world unto himself. The action starts from God. It's not directed at him. And to make this point even sharper, let's just look at the word itself. If reconcile means to change completely, the source asks a really simple but profound question. Who is it that actually needs to change here? The perfect, loving God, or us? Yeah, the author doesn't mince words, calls the idea of God reconciling himself to the world absurd. The argument is that this whole thing is God's project, his initiative, to change our hearts and minds. It's not a transaction to calm his own anger.
So all of this leads us to the real core of the argument. If it's not substitution, then what is it? Well, the author offers up a totally different model, union. Okay, so we're going to get a little technical for a second, diving into the original Greek. The source claims that the word for substitution, anti, which means instead of, is actually rarely used in the Bible in this context. Instead, what you see over and over is the word huper, which means for, or maybe better, on our behalf. This suggests Christ died as our companion, our representative, not our replacement.
So the alternative being proposed here is really clear. Christ isn't some stand-in who takes our spot on the bench. No, he is an associate, a companion, even an elder brother, who enters into our whole experience right alongside us. And to back this up, the source just starts pulling from Scripture. And the language is so consistent. We are crucified with him. We are buried with him. We have died with him. You see the pattern, right? It's always with him. The argument is, this is not the language of replacement. It's the language of a deeply shared experience.
And this quote really ties it all together. Just like all of humanity is sort of united in a shared fate with Adam, the source argues we're united in a shared experience with Christ. It's all about oneness, not substitution.
So, okay, if we accept this model of union over substitution, what does that mean for the endgame? Well, the source argues it leads to a radically different conclusion about how this all wraps up, and about the success of God's entire plan. And wow, the difference in the final score couldn't be more stark. The popular view, according to the author, ends in a partial success, at best. I mean, God's plan seems to fail for a whole lot of people. The alternative, though, argues for a total, universal success, a future where God's purpose for all is finally and fully accomplished. And the scope of this victory? I mean, it is absolutely breathtaking. The source doesn't just limit this reconciliation to people. It argues, based on Scripture, that the work of Christ extends to restore and reconcile all things in the entire cosmos, whether it's stuff on earth or things in heaven.
Okay, so let's just put it all together in a quick recap. In this deconstruction, Christ's work wasn't to satisfy justice, it was to reveal love. He didn't die as our substitute, but as our companion. He didn't die to save us from the penalty of sin, but from sin itself. His work isn't the cause of God's love, it's the effect of it, and that means the final outcome isn't a partial success, but a universal triumph.
And then, the source drops this final, incredibly bold claim. It's not just suggesting a few tweaks or a minor course correction. It's arguing that in every single one of these key areas, the popular understanding is the polar opposite of the truth.
And that's what leaves us with our final thought to chew on. The source presents this whole thing as a complete reversal of the central story of salvation. It asks us to imagine a reality where God was never hostile, never the one who needed to be paid off or appeased. So the question it leaves us with is a powerful one. If God was never the enemy, what does that change about, well, everything?